I'll begin by thanking our sponsors, without whom this event would not be possible: AbbVie, Bristol Myers Squibb, Amgen Oncology, Genentech, Karyopharm Therapeutics, Oncopeptides, Adaptive Biotechnologies, and Takeda Oncology. Our special guest here today is myeloma coach and marriage and family therapist Linda Levin. Linda is a woman of many talents, and she's done a lot of things in her life, as I'm sure she'll tell you, one of which, as I mentioned, was marriage and family therapist. I think she even practiced family law, but you might have to correct me on that, Linda. I'm just excited to hear about you and your life today. She was diagnosed with multiple myeloma and had a stem cell transplant in 2016. Her family and friends were a great support system for her during those trying times. In turn, she is dedicated to helping others through their journey with multiple myeloma. Linda is an amazing woman, and I'm excited to learn from her alongside with you guys tonight. As I mentioned, our topic today is conflict resolution between the caregiver and patient. After sending out the survey at the end of last meeting, so last meeting we talked about caregiver burnout, and it was an amazing meeting, and we had so many people there, so many people participating, and we sent out a survey after that meeting, and we got a lot of responses, so thank you for that. Several of you asked for help navigating difficult situations and handling conflict, and as I read that with my team, we really wanted to look for somebody who had a therapist background that could give kind of a third party, this is how you deal with conflict. And when we found Linda, it was just the perfect match because she's been a caregiver for her parents. She has multiple myeloma herself, as well as diabetes. So she's been through the ringer and she knows what it's like, and she from both sides. And I just thought she was the perfect pick for today. So again, I'm really excited for you guys to hear from her. I know that this has been a time of high stress for the myeloma community, not only with the diagnosis of a cancer disease, but also because of COVID and other social stressors that have been going on across the world. This past year has been incredibly crazy. So it's no wonder that conflict has occurred more often than we would have liked during this past year. I'm excited to listen to Linda and take her practices to heart and apply them in my life. So Linda, the time is now yours, and I'd like to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Audrey. Well, as Audrey had said, I took care of my parents for several years until they passed away. And then I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, and so I'm in remission now, and I've been through all that. So I feel that I'm probably capable to answer your questions on both sides of the aisle. So what we're gonna talk about conflict, and conflict's an inevitable part of an ongoing relationship, and this is especially true in a relationship one person is diagnosed with cancer. Potential issues include family and social isolation and/or conflict, and this, of course, is even more pertinent, I guess, today when, with the pandemic and not being able to see family and friends and things like that. And oftentimes, just having the diagnosis, you don't really want to be social. You don't want people bothering you, if you will. I know I had a tendency to. What? Can you hear me? Oh, anyway, okay. And then you have concerns about your quality of life. Will I be able to work again? Will I be able to travel again? Will I be able to see my family? Will I be able to spend time with my grandkids and my children? And then there's a difficulty of adjusting to the illness or changes in your care. If you're the one that was doing all the cooking and cleaning at home, or whatever your responsibilities are, those may change now because, as most of you probably have experienced, the stem cell transplant really kind of makes it difficult to do a lot of things that you've done in the past until you're able to actually care for yourself again. And then, of course, there's the issue of making decisions for future medical care, your advance directives, your wills, your trusts. And a lot of people ignore this part. I'm kind of amazed at how many stories I've heard of people where, they have the cancer diagnosis and they know that, a friend of mine in particular, they were going to, he was really close to death. And so his wife was scrambling around trying to get the trust signed. And you always think it's not going to happen to you, but it does happen. And you need to make those decisions. And then, of course, there's grief. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about grief today because it affects both the caregiver and the patient. And it's a very personal thing. And people will always try to tell you how to grieve and how not to grieve. And it doesn't really matter what they tell you because it's really what feels right for you. So the effects of cancer can vary from relationship to relationship. Sometimes it'll strengthen the relationship that you have and you'll really reach out. The caregiver and the patient really reach out and support one another. It also creates new problems and worsens existing problems. And then it can also cause the partner to retreat, distract themselves from work or hobbies, or just completely shut down. And this is really difficult when you need support, whether you're the caregiver or the patient. You really need support and you don't know how to approach that person to get what you need. So we're going to talk about the 5 stages of grief. This was established by Kubler-Ross, and it's pretty generally followed in the psychology realm. So the first stage is denial. It's a state of disbelief and numb feelings where that's not really happening to me. I can't believe it. I'm not, I'm going to wake up tomorrow and everything's going to be different. And then comes the anger, which is a normal, it's normal to be angry at the cancer or at the patient for getting sick. And it also, anger is a secondary emotion. First emotion comes from the fear, the panic, frustration, anxiety, helplessness, hopelessness. And so not knowing how to express those feelings, it comes out as anger. Then there's the bargaining, where you go, okay, I'll be a better person. I'll be a better husband. I'll be a better wife. I'll be a better daughter. I'll be a better son, whatever. If you just make this cancer go away. Well, we know that doesn't happen, but that's a process we have to go through. And then the depression. And this is really big because the depression affects both the caregiver and the patient. And it's really important that you address the issue because what happens when you get depressed is, besides being overwhelmed and feeling hopeless and helpless, you also don't want to do anything, and so if that means taking care of the patient and you neglect giving them their medication or taking them to the doctor or feeding them, it can have really traumatic effects. And also it can affect the patient as well, where they don't want to take the medication. So as you can well imagine, that if you don't want to take the medication, you're the one in charge of giving it to them. That's going to create a lot of conflict. So I would say that if you're having these feelings, that you should definitely get some help with it. And then there's the acceptance phase. And I do want to say that a lot of people, you suffer grief and loss for different things, not just for cancer, but it could be the loss of a job. It could be moving from a place you've lived the rest of your whole life, and then you have to reestablish yourself. It's a loss of support from your community. And we're all feeling a lot of these things now, especially with the pandemic. So that And the combination of feeling depressed is really bad. Okay. So now the question is, how can you reduce the conflict? As a caregiver, you can get really overwhelmed and feel really overburdened, and especially if you're working and taking care of the person, you have a lot of responsibility and you're not taking care of yourself. So the one really good way is to express your feelings to somebody else, whether it's who will listen and understand. If you have a friend or another family member that's been diagnosed with cancer, you might want to talk to them because they'll understand all the feelings and anxiety and fears that you may be going through. And you need to separate your needs from the needs of the care receiver, the patient. We have different needs, even though we're obviously very intertwined. And you need to take time to do what you like to do versus what you have to do. You have to take breaks to allow yourself space from caregiving, whether it's taking a walk or doing whatever activities that you enjoy doing. Because oftentimes when you get really burdened and you get really burned out, you tend to get how do I put this? You can get really aggressive and lash out at the person that you love the most and that you're wanting to take care of. And you have to be able to break that cycle. I don't know where everybody's living, but in California, we have elder abuse laws, and striking a patient or being emotionally abusive to somebody can cause a lot of problems and can have you removed from the home. I'm not saying anyone's doing this. I just think you need to be aware of it, that if you're having those feelings, you really need to step away and get help, have somebody come relieve you for a while so you can recharge your battery, so to speak. Now, how do you become an effective communicator? I think our default is always to don't do that, don't eat that, that's really bad for you. When you start doing that, I think the natural response is you just you just shut down. You don't want to hear it. But if you can come to somebody with the I statement and say, I really love you, and I feel really bad when whatever you want to eat that bag of potato chips, which is loaded with salt and loaded with salt and fat, and it's not going to give you very good nutrition. So maybe we can think of another snack that you might like to do. And then they might actually listen to you. And it might actually open up other conversation, like expressing a feeling about why they want to eat that potato chip. Like maybe it makes I think we can move on. So they might say, well, I want to eat those potato chips because it makes me happy. And so then you can reflect back to what they're saying. You listen and reflect back, and you say, well, I understand you've been through a lot lately. And so this is the one thing that really makes you happy. Let's think about some other things that you could do that might make you happy, or some other things we've done in the past that you really enjoyed, and maybe we can somehow recreate that for you. It's really important to listen and to reflect back, because people feel that they're not being heard, that you're so busy managing the everyday, the doctor's appointments, the medications, the meals, the laundry, whatever, that nobody's really listening to either side of you, like what's really going on with you. So if you could open up an opportunity to sit and listen, ask them, well, tell me what's really going on with you, and then reflect back what you hear. It really reduces the level of anxiety because, oh, somebody's actually listening to me and they're not going to lecture me. The other thing is also to ask open-ended questions about the feelings that you're expressing. instead of asking yes or no questions, you might want to say, well, so have you learned anything new today about what you've been experiencing? And that gives them an opportunity to really go anywhere, take off any, on any tangent, and express about how, and talk about how they're really feeling. And then, of course, you want to reflect back what you've heard and see if you can have some kind of resolution of how you can reduce the anxiety. And then the other thing is to normalize their feelings. Because we all think we're the only one going through this. And so as a caregiver, if your patient is saying, God, I feel really depressed, I feel like I'm never going to make it, I'm never going to get through all this. And then you can say, oh, well, I understand that. And, it's not uncommon. Like I had, my mother's cousin or something who had cancer told me that she felt the same way. And she got through it, and, whatever the situation is. But you want to normalize their feelings so they don't feel that they're only one that's going through all this. So in conclusion, because I want to open it up to questions, I see some of you squirming like you have something you really want to talk about. So we're just going to briefly conclude what we talked about. You want to recognize that both the caregiver and the patient go through grief and loss. You want to use the I statement so that you're communicating your love and care to that person, and not just the animosity or putting them down. You want to reflect back what the caregiver and the patient are saying to show that you heard them, and you want to normalize their feelings. Okay.
Thank you, Linda. I think that is a great summary, or like a great, just concise presentation of how to avoid conflict. And also, I think the grief part is important because it's grieving the life that we thought we were going to live. So we thought it was going to be a lot different than what it is now. And, for some, retirement looks different. For some, there's never going to be a retirement because of all the costs, and just little things like that, where it's like, nobody asked for this and nobody expected this. And so, a lot of the grief, I think, comes from you watching the patient change, maybe due to side effects or just complete stress, or you changing. I don't know. There's just so many components to it. So I'm excited to talk about it today. I'm excited to open it up to the people that we have here, because everybody's experience is different, but it's also the same in some ways. So we'd like to hear from you, and we'd like to, if you have questions for Linda about and of course, you're not under any obligation to share things that you're not comfortable sharing. But if you have a question for Linda, or a specific example, or a hypothetical example that might be specific, but you don't have to tell anyone, we're just opening it up to you to ask Linda questions and share experiences and share comments. And before we move into that, I forgot that I did want to say, we tried to keep it short and sweet. One of the reasons why is because we will be sending this recording out, and I thought that it would be beneficial. Sometimes it's hard to say, Mom, look what I learned, or honey, look what I learned about conflict management. Sometimes it's better to just say, hey, if you want to watch this 20-minute recording about what a marriage and family therapist had to say, feel free to watch it, and that way it can be more of a third party helping with how to resolve conflict management. But enough talking from me. I apologize. Let's get to you. So in order to do this, we're going to use the raise hand feature. So for those that are new to the Google Meet platform, let me just walk you through it. If you move your mouse, if you're on a computer, if you move your mouse to the bottom of the screen, a white bar should pop up and there should be a raise hand icon. And if you click on that, it lets me know that you would like to speak, and then I can call on you. and ask you to unmute your microphone and then speak. I also, for those who are on a mobile phone, if you just tap your phone, buttons should pop up at the bottom, and one of them should be that hand feature. So I want to hear from you. For those that feel comfortable or have questions for Linda, so let's open it up. Or also, if you would like to write in the chat, you're welcome to write in the chat as well, and that can be found at the top of your screen. In the top right corner, usually, of course, for some computers it's different, but in the top right corner, there should be a chat box, and you should be able to chat with everybody. So, I don't know, let's get started. I know it's kind of it's a very personal topic, but I would love to hear from any of you if you want to share. Bill, do you have anything to say?
I'm one of the Bills, I guess. So you might be whom you're speaking to.
I am speaking to you, Bill. Yes.
Good. Well, yeah. Number one, I guess I appreciate your having this forum. I appreciate the speaker and the words from the speaker. I think those are all very, very important. I too would, like to move this into kind of being personal, and when we do the speaking like that, I think it sets a theme. But I would personally mostly benefit from hearing stories of folks that have had conflict. I know between myself and my wife, we have issues, I think, that arise. I mentioned this in our last meeting as well. Conflict kind of arises because she needs me, I think, more to be her husband than her caregiver. And sometimes it's easy for me to default into being, it's frankly easier to be a caregiver than a husband. and the reason I say that is it's easy to forget that your wife needs you to be there as her foundation, as her rock. And I think that, not being there like that can cause fear, and fear can cause conflict. That's just my kind of.
No, I appreciate that.
So.
I appreciate that, and thank you for letting me call on you. I knew that you had spoke last meeting, so I was hoping that you would be able to break that ice for us. It looks like we have some raised hands, so we'll move on. It says Susan Benjamin, but you don't look like, maybe your name is Susan, but I don't think so.
No, my name is Robert. I'm using my wife's computer here. So I'm the caregiver and she is the patient. So I had two comments. First, I found that a lot of conflict that I deal with as a caregiver relates to advocacy on Susan's behalf, as opposed to conflict with Susan. So if the speaker or other people might want to address the conflict in the context of advocacy. And then also, when the speaker talked about empathy, what I've learned is not to be too empathetic with the patient, and that we both benefit if I don't feel her pain when she's feeling her pain, but rather keep a certain amount of distance as the caregiver. Although I love her and I sympathize with her and I want her to do everything well, I still have to stay away from her pain in order to be effective.
That's so interesting. I love those comments, and I think one of the most important things is it's going to look different for every relationship. And your spouse or your parent better than anybody else. And so you're going to know how to handle that situation. I'd love to hear a little bit more, and remind me of your name one more time.
Robert.
Yeah. Robert, I'd love to hear more about what you mean by conflict for advocacy. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, when my wife is like hospitalized for an acute condition, or even when she went through stem cell transplant for that matter, there were times when she was not getting something that she needed, and I kind of agreed with her that she needed it. So that put me in conflict with the medical professionals in order to get the service or to get the product or whatever it was that she needed. And so there I saw as great opportunity to do conflict management, to try to get what was needed, but still preserve the relationship with the healthcare team that was extremely important, particularly in stem cell transplant.
No, I love that. I love that. And Linda, do you have any advice? You know, we have this American culture, and I recognize some of you are not from the United States, but we have this culture that doctor knows best. So how can we, do you have any advice, Linda, for when it comes to that kind of situation?
Yeah, I would say I'm probably more of a bull in a china closet because, you know, the saying, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And if you don't speak up, they're gonna ignore you basically. And so I think persistence is the best thing. I mean, yes, it may create more conflict, but on the other hand, you're going to get what you need for you and for your wife. And I had an issue with my first oncologist. I would go in with a list of questions, and he told me he told me to quit going to seminars and to go back to work because he didn't want to deal with the questions I was asking him because it was making him uncomfortable because I actually had more knowledge than he did. So basically I left and I found another doctor that was, you know, much more knowledgeable. He was a myeloma specialist. And that's just my own, what should I say? My own, quirk is that I think you have to go to a myeloma specialist. You have to be with somebody that understands exactly what you're going through. But I don't think you should have to apologize for being assertive for what your wife needs, because you're there 24/7 or whatever you are. You're in contact with the 24/7. You know, she's one of many other patients that the staff has to take care of, and so they don't know that, and they don't know what you're seeing. They don't know what you're witnessing. And I think you have to be there and you have to fight for them. And I personally don't think you have to apologize, but I understand what you're saying. You don't want to, I would just, there's a lot of things you can do. I mean, thank them for sure. You bring them donuts or you bring them whatever. No, I'm serious, because they don't get a lot of praise. They're constantly being complained to and bitched at. And so when you can go out and do something that's really out of the ordinary and something that they don't expect but really appreciate, it goes so much further. I brought all my beads. It took off. Anyway, I used to make a lot of beads until I got neuropathy, a lot of jewelry. And so I brought them all to the hospital. And my two girlfriends came over and they made beads, and we gave bracelets to all the nurses, all the aides, everybody that helped me during the 2 weeks I was in the hospital. And they were so appreciative. They didn't even know what to say. I mean, they were speechless because nobody recognized, everybody is in such a place of need and despair that nobody can think outside of that box. You know what I mean? And so for the fact that they actually are recognized, it goes so much further in getting done what you need to get done.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Linda. Thank you. We have several hands raised, so I think we want to participate in the conversation. Marcia, did you have anything along this topic that you wanted to add, or did you kind of want to take it a different way? Or
no, I want to add, I'm Marcia, and I'm the caregiver to my husband of 35 years. And we're in this journey. We've been on this journey for 4 years. Okay. So this is my high school sweetheart. Been with him for 45 years. Right. So there was this dynamic. We have 3 daughters and a grandson, and life is great and all of that. So now the dynamic has changed. I'm his caregiver. I am officially to him the nagging wife. Okay, I can live with that, because what I'm nagging about is, hey, dude, you need to eat. Did you take your medicine? No, I don't think you should lift that. No, it is when those doctors send me home, and he's had a rough go the last 4 years, in and out of the hospital, all kinds of things. When they send me home with that discharge sheet with the instructions on it, I take that seriously. And I'm saying to him, no, you're not going to hurt yourself on my watch, because they're looking at me. So it is a complete mess. I'll be real honest. I love him and he loves me, but the dynamic has changed. So what I had to do was figure out two things. I was driving myself crazy, trying to make this grown man do and not do. And my mom was like, you can't, Marcia, settle down and just pray your way through it, is what she said. But these adult daughters of ours, they've taken some of the load off of me. So I am no longer saying to daddy, you need to eat, or don't pick the baby up. So these adult daughters are now trying to take that off of me, so he doesn't look at me like, oh my gosh, here comes Marcia. And one last thing I will say, that I will be really honest, I had to get used to this. I am treated the worst by him when he's sick, when he's tired, and he's a dialysis patient too. If I ask any little thing, at times I get snapped at. Well, my personality is like, oh, you don't get to snap at me, but I have to stop myself. And I did ask some medical professionals, why is this? And a couple of nurses explained to me that he's so charming to the hospital staff. They love him. He's a charming guy. He's chill. He's wonderful. But they said, Marcia, he doesn't have to be nice to you. You're not going to go anywhere.
Right.
I was like, really? Yes, I am. They're like, no, you're not. You're and you're going to do what you have to do. He knows that it wouldn't be polite for him to be short with us. And I had to internalize that and get used to that. Trust me, there are days I'm still trying to get used to that, but that's my story.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you for sharing that. Natalia, would you like to share with us?
Am I on? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
I hear Marcia and I hear Robert and share much of that. And my husband has had myeloma for 12 years. He's just become my husband 8 months ago, but I was just his girlfriend before that, or his main squeeze, whichever way you want to say. But I've been his caregiver since I moved in with him. He was diagnosed a week after I moved in with him. So I have had to be his advocate, because you know what? The medical community makes a lot of mistakes.
Yep.
And it has been, his oncologist calls me the colonel because I'm always asking questions and always saying, what about this? And it's tough. You just can't expect the medical community to be perfect, because they're human beings and they make mistakes. And sometimes I feel really embarrassed and guilty for being bad cop, but you have to be bad cop. And so I've had to but I do feel guilty. I feel ashamed of myself sometimes for being aggressive even, because I've had to be. And I've had to fight with hospitals about bills because we weren't going to pay them because they did things wrong. And anyway, but with Marcia, I'm his scapegoat. He doesn't have anybody else to be angry at. And it's really hard. And since I was new, we had a new relationship when he was diagnosed. We didn't have years of experience. And I didn't react well to that. I took it all to heart, and it hurt. And I was here keeping the man alive, and he's demeaning me, But we've kind of worked a lot. We've gone through therapy, which helps a lot. But right now we're having a conflict because he's just, in the last 3 months, he's almost died twice. He's been in the hospital 29 days. And I am over mothering because I was scared, really scared of him dying. And he's resenting it. Of course, he's resenting it. He wants to have some autonomy. And it's hard. I don't know how to give him the autonomy he needs to feel good about himself and still
Well,
watch him not take his medication right?
Well, I think it's really important that you allow them being the patient, to control whatever they can control. Obviously, you're going to be another set of eyes watching that. But you said you want him to make him feel better about himself. And that's one, I mean, a small way, like, I don't know if you sit there and hover over him while he takes his medication.
Sometimes.
Okay.
I admit it.
Put it
Okay.
in applesauce. Can you put it in applesauce?
It's just that there's the timing of his certain things have to be done in a certain timing, and he gets the timing wrong. So I do hover.
Well, so I mean, like I said, can you approach it from the I statement? Like, I understand you really don't want to take this, and I understand it'll be really hard for me to have to take all these pills and be so regimented and everything else. But you know what? I really love you, and I really want you to be around here with me, so we can, go do whatever plans are that you were planning on doing, prior to the diagnosis. And so I'd really appreciate it, and it really make me feel a lot better if you would just take them and see what he says. I mean, that's his way of
having some control.
Right, exactly. So I think if you can minimize that, like as you being the bad cop, and let him take a little bit of control, as little as it is, but in his mind, that might be huge. Then I mean, try it. That might go a long way.
Okay, thank you.
I like that.
You're welcome.
Awesome. And we have Wayne Brimhall, but I don't think it's Wayne. I think maybe it is. I can't see. Let's see. It says Wayne Brimhall on your account, but I think I've seen you before and you're not Wayne Brimhall. So we see anyone. All right, we can move on.
Okay, I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
I thought you were unmuting me. I had to unmute myself.
No, sorry.
I'm Nancy. I'm the caregiver.
Yeah, there you are, Nancy.
And have a long history, my husband and I, of me being the caregiver. I'm actually an RN, so this was kind of part of the picture too. So, but he had a lot of heart problems even before the myeloma became an issue. I remember years ago going to his doctor after a serious heart episode, and being in the room with my husband and kind of answering questions for him and dealing with the doctor. And doctor looked at me and he said, "He's not a cardiac cripple. Either let him talk or you have to leave the room." Okay. And it's a balancing act, and it's a difficult one. Between respecting the person and their autonomy and their ability to make their own decisions, which sometimes might not be in their best interest, and giving them all the support and help that you can within reason. And fortunately, my husband's pretty good. He has charts, and he checks his blood sugar, and he puts it in his phone, and he checks his INR for blood thinning, and he writes that down, and he has a checklist to check off how many glasses of fluid he's taking a day. So he's good at that stuff. He's not so good with not eating things that are bad for him. And he's not so good at pushing himself to do a little more exercise. And so those are probably the two areas where where I'm kind of reminding him. But, we've come to the point where, I will remind him, how are you feeling? Do you feel like you're up to taking a walk now? And if he says no, I can't argue. So that's kind of where we are.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Nancy. I really appreciate that. And I love that you have a perspective as an RN, because I think that gives you a lot of medical background, but then it also puts extra pressure on you to not be too nursey as the caregiver. So I admire you. Bill, do you have something else? Love to hear from you.
Yeah, I was struck. I heard Linda mention being an advocate, and a lot of others comments have been about being an advocate. It struck me that, as a caregiver, we play lots of roles, and it's easy to think right off of, well, the caregiver is kind of like the babysitter and the cook and the cleaner and the whatever. But there's so many more roles, and advocacy is one of those roles that can be really, really tricky. My wife really needed somebody to be her advocate. Now, part of that was because of the husband and wife relationship. Part of that is just because she just needed an advocate. She's a very strong person. It's just kind of weird because she's a very strong person, but she felt inadequate to be her own advocate. And she kind of knew that she was going to be loopy with the medicine and whatnot. And she's like, I need you to be my advocate. And if you can't be my advocate, that's okay. Because you, Bill, I'm kind of mild-mannered. She said, if you can't get in there and fight for me, I get it. But if you can't, I need to find somebody who can. Well, that kind of like, oh my goodness, I'd be failing my wife if I can't do this. But as we look in the different roles that we play, advocate, physical caregiver, and whatnot, if we just feel incapable, or we just don't feel like that's our strong suit and we can't do it as well as we need to for our patient, and we just feel ashamed or guilt or whatever because we're not doing that, you can get help for those things. So there are people who are like professional advocates, and there's certainly people that are professional physical caregivers. And so, if you're feeling guilt in some area like that, as I often did, I often felt like I was an inadequate advocate. You can get professional help in those areas. So
I think that's that's great, Bill. I think that's a good point because, talking about normalizing your feelings, your role is heavy and you wear many hats as a caregiver. And I think that I love that. I love that, if you need a professional advocate, get one. If you need a professional house cleaner, get one if you can. And there are financial resources to help with things that you would probably be surprised about. And we're actually going to talk about that next month in our caregiver meeting, is what financial resources are out there for you. But Diane, it's great to see you here. Would you like to speak?
Hi, sure. My story is a little similar to Marcia in the sense that my husband and I have been married for 31 years, and he was diagnosed 3 years ago. We didn't and don't have a lot of conflict, but when we do, I can guarantee you Dex is involved. And it's one of those things that in the heat of it, he cannot possibly believe that Dex is involved and that that's not the reason. 2 days later, he'll get it and understand. And I know the Dex schedule, so you would think I would learn. We were pretty good. We were on it. He was only doing it once a month, and that was okay, easy to deal with. But he's recently been put back on it every week, and that is tough to every week. And most recently, I woke up in the morning. I'm like, I know it's a Dex day. I'm just gonna try not to engage. And I actually we got into it because I didn't agree with him strongly enough about something I did agree with him on, but I didn't express my feeling. So any tips on anyone else? I'm seeing people smiling, and I guess you all feel similar and go through it the same. But any tips on how to really not engage when I wake up knowing I'm not going to engage and then still wind up somehow engaging? Be helpful.
All right, Robert, do you want to go? Oh, you're muted. So if you want to unmute your microphone.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment on what Natalia was talking about earlier about trying to work out the relationship of whose job it is to deal with the pills or whatever. So when my wife was first getting treated, we had a number of conflicts like that. And I felt a strong need to try to simplify life for her and me. And so what I came up with, and it seems to be working now, is is simply defining what our jobs are at this moment. So in the case of, like pills, for example, I mean, my wife takes her own medication, so I'm not involved, but if she were to need me to help monitor the pills, I would just work out an agreement with her whose job it is right now to deal with these pills. And if she says it's hers, then I say, fine, I walk away. If she says she needs to be monitored, I would stay there. So I wouldn't really fight with her about whose job it is, but I would insist that we agree about whose job it is, to be doing it at this moment, not in general, but at this moment.
I
Because
love that.
we have had conflicts when she's had to get certain kind of treatments, and question is, well, who's going to take notes in the doctor's office? Is that my job or her job? And who's going to ask certain questions in the doctor's office? There are certain questions she's reluctant to ask the doctor, but I'm game. And she says, okay, that's your job to ask that question. And I say, fine, I accept it.
I like that.
So I've really found that to be a simplifying way of dealing with that kind of conflict.
Thank you. Thank you. And Robert, there were actually some follow-up things to what you said earlier. But before I go into those, there have also been shared in the chat different there's alarms that are set to remind the patient to take their meds on the phone. And so, this patient had said, I hate that you keep asking me if I took my pills. So they set an alarm on the phone or I'm not sure if it's on the phone, but they set an alarm and that seemed to be working. And then Linda also said that they use an app called MediSafe and that has worked great. So there are different options too, where, if you need that third party as a reminder. But then there was that follow-up, Robert, and they asked if you could tell them your secret weapon on how not to feel the pain of the patient. What's that secret weapon of not engaging in their pain, not empathizing too much?
Well, my secret weapon is to come to the realization that by not engaging in my wife's pain, I can serve her better than if I do engage. But I recognize what Bill had said earlier about being a husband and a caregiver. So there are times when it's important that I do engage, but I'm wearing my husband's hat at that moment, not my caregiver hat. When I'm wearing my caregiver hat, I always try to ask the question, what can I be doing now that's going to most help my wife?
I like that. I really like that. Thank you. We have Sue Nappy that raised her hand.
Yes, this is to Diane. My husband is very strong-willed Italian, very stubborn. And his first year of diagnosis, he was on dexamethasone, 40 milligrams every Monday. And I cried for 6 months. It was horrible. So I have 3 children. They're all, we have 3 children. They're all out of the house. And with one of my children, they showed me the light. She says, Mom, just yes him to death. He's not going to remember anything the next day. And, I was like, oh, it was a perspective from somebody from the outside looking in, seeing these fights, because we would go at it. Because he didn't even remember, and he didn't remember the next day. He'd accuse me of moving his car keys and hiding them from him. And it'd be, he had them where he usually has them. And I'd argue with him. I didn't move mine to touch them. It didn't matter. I touched them. I put them back there so he couldn't find them. But I did that, and I started yesing him to death. And sure enough, it just took all that pain away. So I had 6 months of crying and 6 months of okay. So he went back the second we went into remission. He went back on dexamethasone, and luckily we had a different doctor. We had a specialist from the beginning, but we were only seeing her for second opinions. Now we started going all the time to her, and I think maybe because she's a female, I'm more empathetic to what I was feeling. And I had said in the appointments, if he goes back on 40 milligrams, I may have to move out. And she heard that. He was stubborn. He was not going to reduce it, even though the other doctor said, well, you can reduce it. And my husband was like, no, I'm not going to reduce it. I want to beat this thing. But she was like, oh, we need to reduce this to 20 milligrams. And he listened to her, where he wasn't going to. So it worked out much better, maybe getting that doctor involved too, because the 20 milligram worked fine, and he's back in remission again, doing well. And the whole cancer brought us closer together. It was that dexamethasone, that devil drug that was the worst. That's it.
That's great, Sue. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I appreciate this conversation. For me, it's really fulfilling to hear people share their experiences and to know that this is a place where we can connect and share experiences. So we're nearing the end, but we have a time for a couple more if somebody wants to raise their hand and speak to us. We do have a little bit more time if somebody wants to raise their hand. All right, Dolores, would you like to unmute your microphone and say something?
I had, when we're talking about pills, one of the things that I found really difficult was knowing when to kind of go to the hospital, like when we were in a situation where we needed to go. And then there was always kind of this feeling of, I've got to make sure I've got this and, whatever. So one of the nurses at the cancer center actually said to me, write up an index card with everything that he takes and what the dosage is and what time he takes it, and put it in a bag that you would put your medicine in to go to the hospital. And that way you don't have to think, you just grab the bag and you go. And I thought it was a really, really good thing to have it all together, because lots of times we got there and they wouldn't give him medication that he needed, but I knew he needed it. And I'd say, I'm giving him his AFib medication. He normally takes it at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm giving it to him. Oh, that's fine. You can give it to him. But there's no way they would have got it into him at the time. But because I had it, they let him have it, things like that. So that was just something. But after listening to everybody else, my husband really didn't have a big problem with Dex. And I think I might have been married to a saint. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to tell him. But if I have a concern at all with how things kind of go, he's probably not even so much him, but my kids tell me that I try to keep him a little bit in a bubble and that I need to let him be more free. And a couple of times it's been really hard to do that. He loves to cycle. And the first time he went on a major long bike ride, some of the kids were with him, but I was terrified of him getting hurt because he's also on blood thinners. I was terrified of him getting hurt and that I wouldn't be there. And my daughter says, I will watch over him. I promise, like a hawk, but it's stuff like that. But it was really, it was a really emotional day. Like I was in tears by the end of the day because I was so worried about him. And yet I had to let him go because that's something he loves to do. I can't hold him back. But that's probably my biggest thing. If I'm accused of anything in our family, is holding him in a little too tight. So yeah, but I do use lots of the I language when there's issues, and that really does help. So I appreciate that, Linda. Thank you for clarifying that. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think it's important to also, as Linda was saying at the beginning, to take time for you. So sometimes you put yourself in a bubble as well and think, my only hats now can be husband and caregiver. My only hats now can be daughter and caregiver, or wife and caregiver, wherever it may be. And it's so important to remember that you have things that you love and need to take time to do them as well. Kind of as we said last session, to avoid burnout and also to avoid conflict. Linda, is there any final words that you want to share with the group before we say goodbye?
No, I empathize and sympathize with all of you. I've been there and I understand it, and there's no easy way, but I do think as a caregiver, you definitely need to take time for yourself and not feel guilty about it. You need to carve out some time where you can go get recharged and then come back with a fresh perspective on what's going on. And I commend all of you. I didn't have to take much Dex, so because it was wreaking havoc with my blood sugars, but I remember being up till 1, 2 in the morning making blankets on the floor. I couldn't sleep.
Oh man, that dreaded Dex.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Linda, for sharing your expertise.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. And good luck to everybody.
We're gonna end with some outro announcements, and then we will say goodbye. Just thank you again for your participation, your vulnerability, and sharing your experiences. I know that it's not easy, but I'm thankful we took the plunge and we were able to share those personal experiences together. Our next Myeloma Caregivers event will be April 15th, 2021, and we will be discussing financial help and resources for the myeloma family. So not only for the patient, but costs could run high for the entire family, including furry friends sometimes if you need a place to have them stay while there's a stem cell transplant or anything like that. Anyway, we just recognize those costs that can add up in different ways. And so Diana Valentine, who is a former myeloma caregiver herself, and our myeloma financial coach will be sharing helpful resources with you. Those costs, as I mentioned, really do add up, and we want you to be aware of financial help and resources before financial toxicity hits. Upcoming events in our myeloma community program that you might be interested in. Wednesday, March 17th at 3 p.m. Eastern is our Connect with the Myeloma Crowd event. We're going to be talking about the newest feature in HealthTree Cure Hub called Patient Solutions. And this is my favorite feature to date because we always talk about side effects, even as caregivers. What side effects are the patients experiencing? And this tool aims to name those side effects, but solutions to those side effects. And you're able to see if it works, if it doesn't work, you're able to vote, yes, that works, no, it doesn't work. Anyway, it's a super exciting new feature. So we'd love it if you could join us for that event. On Thursday, March 18th at 1 p.m. Eastern will be our newly diagnosed myeloma patients event. And I will say you can attend this as a caregiver as well if your loved one is recently diagnosed in 2020 or 2021. We'll be exploring stem cell transplants. Saturday, March 20th at 12 p.m. Eastern is our Myeloma Crowd Roundtable. So that is a different program called Myeloma Crowd Roundtables. Multiple myeloma specialists are talking about what's next, decision-making for relapsed or refractory myeloma. And then on Wednesday, March 24th at 1 p.m. Eastern, excuse me for the typo there, is our selinexor support group chapter, How XPOVIO Works in Your Body. So XPOVIO is the brand name for selinexor, and we're just going to talk about the innovative and new way that XPOVIO works in your body and how exciting that is and what it means for myeloma treatment. The link to sign up for any of these events or even more events that I haven't mentioned today is at the bottom of the slide. And just a reminder that this recording and the slides will be sent to all registrants 24 to 48 hours after this event. Special thanks again to our community sponsors without whom this event would not be possible.